Good afternoon. My name is Sarah Bickel, and I'm a student at National University working on my master's degree in Homeland Security and Emergency Management. I chose to do my thesis, my capstone, on El Cajon's emergency evacuation capabilities, focusing primarily on their planning for transportation needs of people in El Cajon during emergency evacuations. A quick overview of what I'm going to discuss today will be the introduction, background of the study, literature review, the history and prior studies, methodology behind the study I conducted, and I'll go over the results and a conclusion of what I found during the study, as well as future recommendations. So the reason I chose this study was because looking at all the after actions of Katrina, one of the things that was brought to attention in the after action reviews were the lack of transportation needs being met for people to leave the city during the storm, whether they didn't have cars or they didn't know where to evacuate to. So it kind of made me want to focus in on that and to, try to prevent that from future mass evacuations during natural disasters or man-made disasters. So the problem statement was to identify the needs in El Cajon for transportation assistance during evacuations. I wanted to see if El Cajon had properly planned for the population that would need to be transported during an evacuation. Some of the limitations to my study was time and manpower. It's an 8-week course, and I only had a portion of that course dedicated to actually collecting and conducting my study. My hypothesis is that the city of El Cajon has underestimated the total population that would need assistance during evacuation with transportation. During my literature review, some of the big things I took away was, first of all, people without cars. So kind of who needs assistance during evacuation, large scale. And some of the reasons people don't have cars might namely be poverty being one of the main reasons, as well as disabilities, whether they can't operate a vehicle or they need special vehicles enabled to be transported. Another one is lifestyle. So if you live in large cities, they tend to have a higher proportion of the population that does not have cars. Cities like Chicago, New York City. New York City has over 27% of their population do not have vehicles. And during their study, it was found that emergency managers, because of such a large scale population that would need assistance, their emergency plan was for people to go out of the city on foot. So larger cities, a lot of times people can get to wherever they need in their day-to-day life from walking, buses, or public transportation. So you'll find more often people in large cities don't have their own private vehicles. And then if they do have a vehicle, we still run into the fact that not everybody will leave during evacuations. Sometimes people won't leave. Once again, kind of goes back to money and poverty if they don't have the money for a car, or if they have financial concerns about where they're going to evacuate to. Concerns with, the basic needs, shelter, water, food. Are they going to go into a shelter? Are they going to pay for their own hotel? How are they going to get food? How are they going to get money? So some people may not want to leave because they're not sure those resources will be provided for them and they have it at their own home. Other people are concerned about pets or even medical because they have their own medical supplies or equipment in their homes and they're not sure how to get those medical resources out, or they're leaning on local economy, churches and other facilities that provide free medical care. So they're afraid to leave because they don't know if that medical care will be provided when they leave or those other benefits or resources they get. Another thing discussed was some of the best practices. So going back to those resources being provided in the local community, it was found during a lot of the different articles and research I reviewed was that a strong coordination with the emergency management office and the local community, churches, nonprofit organizations, and other organizations within that city would help best communicate the needs up to the city officials and also down to the people in the city, both directions of what they need and what they can support and how to help each other get that during an emergency. Some of the weaknesses I found during most planning processes, besides inadequate planning for just how large scale that need will be for your population doesn't have transportation, is also people not wanting to come forward ahead of time to state that they would need assistance, whether they have medical issues and they're afraid of loss of privacy of their information, whether they are undocumented and are concerned or have the government would maybe arrest them or not take care of them, or whether they're foreign born and they have more resistance or hesitation with the local government and reaching out ahead of time. So there's certain people that are just not wanting to communicate proactively to the local government. And those, you'll find that you also have your transient population that isn't always documented, whether that's the tourist population, the homeless population. So a lot of weaknesses in the planning process is it's not accounting for the full or true population that would need help during an emergency. So in my methodology, what I did, the procedures, I kind of broke it down in two parts. I did a data collection and then I did conduct one survey. The data collection, what I wanted to look at was trying to get a better estimate of who needs assistance. So I gathered data, mostly using open engine web search, Google and other resources, trying to find city, state, county, and other official documents where they've already pulled census because I didn't have time to conduct all those studies myself, surveys. So I tried to pull pre-existing surveys of census information, such as the age population over 65, because oftentimes as the people get older, they have less and less ability to drive themselves if they have their own vehicle, or they sometimes don't have vehicles anymore. Population with disabilities. Now, when I pulled that population, that doesn't mean they can't operate a vehicle. So that number, it's good to see, but it doesn't give you a true picture. The homeless population, which is kind of transient. So in the data I pulled from 2020 numbers, the carless population for El Cajon, as well as the lower income population, because usually, they kind of fall into that, either don't have a vehicle or need additional assistance. I also looked at people that's primary languages aren't English, because when we're communicating those messages, we need to make sure that people in the city are able to receive those messages. Looked at people living in nursing homes, assisted living, and then the foreign-born. So those are kind of the data that I looked at and collected during my data analysis. And then I did conduct a survey with one of the larger homeless shelters / transitional homes in El Cajon. They can host up to about 430 people. That includes singles to include families, so that number fluctuates some. And asking them how many of those people come there without vehicles, and they informed me that roughly 2/3 of the people that do come there actually have vehicles. And the few that don't, they do help with, by the time they leave, those people, helping get those people get transportation. Um, and usually people say they're about 3 months, sometimes longer, sometimes shorter. They'll kind of help with that transition. What I don't capture is the population that isn't living in those shelters or using those shelters in the survey part. Now, the data analysis, I pulled some numbers, but once again, the homeless population kind of is transitory in numbers, and I did not pull the tourist population. So as you can see, the graph and the chart on there is a quick summary of my results. Overall, I found that El Cajon has several programs and organizations that are already partnered with to help meet transportation needs of their citizens, such as Neighborhood Evacuation Team program and Facility Access to Coordinated Transportation, which helps to transport the needs of elderly people with disabilities and income disadvantaged people. Additionally, they participate in the Social Service Transportation Advisory Council, which meets yearly. That's more of a county level, but it does come together and group people from across different agencies, profit, nonprofit, Red Cross, and other agencies that would help in emergency evacuations, and they kind of come together yearly to meet and make sure they're meeting each other's needs. As I mentioned earlier, over 42% of the population, English is not their primary language. So when we push out information about emergency notices, you want to make sure that you're communicating effectively with the people within that community. El Cajon does have a diverse language population, so it's important so that you can reach out to all members. I found at the county level, a lot of the websites were able to be interchangeable to multiple different languages. I didn't find that as much at the city level. And we want to make sure that those emergency notices messages that are being pushed out are also being pushed out in different languages for that population. Additionally, El Cajon is using the county's estimate for the carless population, and the carless population is about just a little over 5% in the county, while El Cajon is sitting a little over 8% just for carless alone. So they're currently under planning for the population that would need assistance during an emergency. So in conclusion, San Diego County, to include El Cajon, has taken active measures for transportation of a large percentage of their population. El Cajon has a larger percent of its population that live below the poverty line, which is why I selected them, but similar to New Orleans, who had a large population under the poverty line, usually meaning they'll need more assistance to be transported or during emergencies and disasters. So right now, Homeland is currently underestimating, but they are actively working programs and trying to identify and assist in the transportation needs of their population. Future recommendations, I would still need to conduct further or recommend someone conducting further research to really better picture the population in El Cajon that need transportation during emergency evacuations. I have an estimate, but I feel like the data was very rough, and be able to conduct the door-to-door surveys or getting up with churches and other nonprofit organizations and even other for-profit organizations within the city would help get a better picture of who needs it and how those people will be able to communicate back and forth, the people in the city stating, reaching out to say, hey, they need assistance, and then the emergency managers reaching out to the people in the community saying, hey, this is where we're going to meet, or this is how we're going to provide that assistance. So I need to find a better, they need to better communicate. They need to ensure the notifications and information being sent out is in the language they speak. So further research into, programs or ways to push out that information in the appropriate language. And then I wasn't able to, but we also need to ensure that mutual support agreements and memorandums for the record, for understanding, are in place and practiced to ensure El Cajon is better ready to support the community during emergency needs. I found in the past studies that people will have agreements in place, but they don't really exercise them, and then when it comes time to activating them, it wasn't properly planned for. But that is my research. If there's any questions, please let me know, and thank you.